I do apologise for this morning. After seeing Miss Sam and Devita Kaufusi on the dance floor last night, I thought there goes the 90 AM start, and I apologise for due to other things. As the representative of Mangere or Mangere or Mangere or Mangere, a place that we affectionately call the gateway to the nation, the land of the young, beautiful and gifted. The community has certain protocols for occasions such as this that I abide with and promote, and so please bear with me as I follow these protocols in using Te Reo Māori and using my first language, otherwise known as the language of the angels. To greet and acknowledge you on this special and auspicious occasion. Whakaronga ke au ki te tangi tuia ki runga, tuia ki raro, tuia ki waho, tuia ki te here tangata ki hei Māori ora. Ngā mana, e ngā iwi, e ngā reo, e ngā hau e whā, e ngā karangaranga maha, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Ua motu le masa le sui ngā uranga le papa. Ua musa foi whonga al sangarala. O tala leo malio le anu tu ia tua ai ta oto le vai le atata o tama sa mona ngalo. O mana tuai nai le whetalainga I malai awa bau ma malai tele. Ua pa ia le sami malawa lele. Ua pa ia lunga, ua pa ia lalo, ua pa ia whale, ua pa ia whafo, ua pa ia basa I basa. A wā le whetalainga ia pō mao marola ua whale ntulutulu I tau. Ua atoa tupe I whao. Ua atoa whanga I la ua. Ua atoa tino le masina. Ua atoa fo I tino ia matau sili. Ua atua le dato tai au whisiri sili whai. Lea ua au fia e pa ia maulunga I sui o le yungu o whai a oma. Le pa ia I tupu mai e o dato wa tunu. Ai mai se fo I tangata Pasifika. I le pa ia I le ainga o tupu mara inga te makalasi o tonga. I te a iki a wā kuki ai raki. Ai mai se fo I le pa ia lasi I we tonga fiki to e lau. Ma le mamalu ua whanfopoto. Mai se fo I le whai pule o maunga kia kia. Le ua fio I nei aso. Wō me masani. Ia tāra whalawa. Malo lei whakalopa lai atu. Ki rangata to katoa nisa pula rinaka. And warm Pacific greetings to one and all. And I do apologise if that is long, but those are the protocols that we keep in the land of the young, beautiful and gifted, otherwise known as Mangere. Look, yesterday Dr. Tustala read her signature poem, the fast-talking PI. I really like the part where she says, I'm a standing PI, I'm a beehive PI, I'm a Labour MP, gonna be PMPI, sorry Sam. But that's what she says. For the record, I'm a slow talking, slow walking, steady as she goes PI. But I am going to follow in the footsteps of Buima Goshi yesterday and take his lead and share with you a little bit about myself. The old saying, otherwise, it's best that we break down the barriers by giving you knowledge of a little bit about myself. I then want to share with you what has occurred, what has happened around the language petition, and where I think that will go. And I'll conclude with sharing with you some of my thoughts about your conference theme. You know, speak out, speak loud, speak out. I think your president said speak proud. But you know, these conferences, yesterday I met True Wilson. It's a funny thing about meeting old teachers from Hillary College. And when you look at them and they look the same, they look like they haven't changed, and you wonder, what's happened to me? If they remain the same, something has happened to me, and I think I'm starting to feel that age is catching up. But I remember leaving Samoa as a young man, the gathering of our family in Saleufi, Apia, the prayer, the big feast, everybody crying, and then later on the farewell at the wharf in Apia. The singing of songs, and of course as the boat moved out in the dark, the tofua, you see the trail of white flowers, white leis, white handkerchiefs as people waved, because in those days it was felt you were going somewhere where you did not know what would happen to you and whether you would return. In fact, it took about several weeks for letters to get from Samoa here to New Zealand. I remember the boat travelling from island to island. I remember in Tonga we lost mats that we had out on the deck to dry. I remember landing in Suva in Fiji and catching the bus from Suva to Nandi and seeing frogs, lots and lots of frogs, and then catching the plane and landing in Mangere, the Auckland International Airport. Those are vivid memories that my children, my nieces and nephews get to hear from me repeating time and time again in order for it to sink down into their psyche, and hopefully that they appreciate the sacrifices made by my parents and by my uncles and aunts and those who came before us. I remember that when we left, the grandparents and the family would say things like, "Ia tamalelei, ia matua, ia tō anga I ngā oma." Be a good boy, be obedient to your parents, and study hard. Because in those days, it was the vision that we come here, that we work hard, that we send money back to the islands, and that we give the opportunities to our young children to achieve great things through education. I remember an uncle sitting down and saying one time to me and saying, "Son, ye ko anga ngā oma, aua e ke pei o aku. Son, you be studious at school, do not be like me." And he drank hard, he worked hard, he played hard. He married so many, as that generation did. And it was their expectation that for the next generation, that we achieve greater and better things than they did. In fact, an uncle said to his son, "The highest I've been able to achieve in this life is to become a security guard. I don't want you to become a security guard. I want you to do something better." And so that was the vision and the goal, and I stand here, as many of you will be in a position to do so, and say that we are the beneficiaries of that vision. We are the beneficiaries of those sacrifices and the journeys that those people before us had started. I'm also a Catholic, and well, my father is a Catholic, let me correct that. My father is a Catholic, my mother is a Mormon. And we grew up in Otara. And in the 1970s, during the dawn raid periods, the Catholic Church particularly stood by the Samoan community at that particular time, advocating for the return of those who were in prison, advocating that the government, the police had got it wrong. And later on, the group of Samoan elders in Otara formed the Samoan Catholic Society, which now comprises of 25 parishes throughout the Auckland region. But the Otara Catholic leaders were also members of the Labour Party in Otara. So it became natural for me to begin my service there by serving coffee, tea, pancakes in the evening during their meetings. Later on, becoming the gopher, go to the market and man the flea market stall. Go and give out these leaflets. Go put up the signs in those days. And then later on, becoming very interested in politics and formally joining the Labour Party in 1986. Literally, we were o lima mawai o toi ina. We were the hands and the feet of these elders. And so we basically followed, did what they did. We didn't necessarily agree with them all the time. And often I remember when I took up the reins of the chair of one of the branches in the Aotearoa Labour Party, we would argue publicly in the papers. And the old man, Tanawasa Jim Yandel, who was one of the first Pacific councillors in the Auckland City, we disagreed on things. And he taught me a lesson. He says, even though we might disagree publicly, in private, you and I are friends. And that has remained, that we are able to disagree, but still maintain these relationships as we move forward. In 1986, Colin Moyle was the MP for Aotearoa. And there came a time where we said to him, when are you going to leave? and we kept saying that. We kept saying that until 1989, he said he was going to retire. And we had a looming election in 1990. And so the word went out, who was going to replace Colin Moyle? Now, we didn't share that part, so I'm going to share with you what happened. We wanted a Pacific person in Parliament. And the few of us who were there started talking about this. Unfortunately, the party had somebody else who they wanted to replace Colin Moyle. But that did not eventuate, and that was the opening that we then took up. Kuku Wawatai was going to be the candidate. He was Deputy Mayor of Manukau City, but other things eventuated, and therefore it gave us an opening, and we put up that we wanted a Pacific person in Parliament. We knew that if we got a Pacific person in Parliament, that the door would open and others would follow. And so we agitated, and we learned through that particular process how the party worked, by talking to the president, by talking to the council, by talking to the local party, but also convincing others around that particular region. But it was hard work. In those days, people kept saying, well, it's not your time. Maybe next time. And of course, there is no perfect politician. Am I right, sir? Everybody has their weaknesses. And so, after a while, the community, the Labour Party united on Tato Philip Field. He became the first Pacific MP. I say no more. Later, Norman Mawini became the first Pacific woman MP. Rui Mark Goshi becomes the first Pacific MP to be a Minister of the Crown. Charles Chabal becomes the first Tahitian MP. And I came after him, and I promoted myself as the youngest, most handsomest of the lot. And then followed, of course, we have Estar Samhotu'in, Alfred Ngaro, and Chris Fafoi Aramana, the first Tokelao. Alfred Ngaro being the first Kokai. Asenati Le'au Asenati Taylor, the first for New Zealand first. And so this is what has happened from that vision of long ago, that once we got somebody in, the door would open. And it was exciting because we said to one another, we are creating history. And nobody can tell us when our time is right. Only we decide when that time is right. And so that just sort of gives you a little bit about